distant call. It's all, this incredible space-age futuristic world that they're talking about, and it's the world we live in today, right? And so it really is remarkable to talk about how these changes came about, these things that we take for granted. So one thing that we learned in teaching this class is our students, were born not just in this world of computing, but they were born after 9/11. So there are a lot of political things that they totally take for granted, and it's important to step back and say, hey, here's how we got here.
Oh, I agree. One of my favorite, most funniest things that was on Facebook lately was a picture of a rotary dial telephone with a note written in cursive next to it. And the caption was, "How to disable 2 entire generations." Yes, it was beautiful for someone that came from that generation of knowing what a rotary dial phone was and how to write in cursive.
That's right.
Right.
Yes, but reading this book, is so awesome because, you guys have done such a great job of providing in a very readable and usable way the information of what happened and when and who. And it was so cool because some of the things that you guys referenced to were things that were happening in my own life. And I was like, oh, yes, I remember that. Oh, yes, I remember that. As one of the first few people that was female that went to a military academy, I'm like, oh, yes, I remember a lot of that.
All right.
Yeah. And, and a lot of that is covered in your book about how those things happened and how it went forward from there. And the younger people that are in your classes, no, they don't know that. They see an integrated military and they think that it's always been that way because that's the way it is for them.
And that's a big part. I mean, a big part of the book is how average people change the history that they live in. And, the book starts really after Watergate with a history of the conservative movement in the 1970s, which was, many people going to their churches or involved in civic institutions who decided to try to move the country rightward. And the movement that they built in the 70s, we argue, has a dramatic effect on the way Washington works, on our ideas about politics. And the book looks at lots of social movements, the feminist movement, the civil rights movement after the 1960s, and many more right through this day. And one of our stories is just how much of an impact the average person can be. And I think both Kevin and I want to impart that certainly to our students, but also to our readers. And through the history is the best way to show that the grassroots really does matter, and efforts to change the big issues are not fruitless, and sometimes they can culminate in us moving in very different directions as a country.
So you guys are just spelling the myth that you just can't change City Hall, or you just can't fight City Hall. Was that the?
Oh,
the
no,
myth?
you can fight it. People always have. That's one of the things I think that this recent history really teaches us, as Julian said. Our students, and I think, again, people in the general public have an idea that things are really contentious now, but there was this time in the past when everyone got along. That's not the story at all. American history has always been one of struggle, of clashes, of conflict, and that's this productive stuff comes out of that. And so I think it's important for people to remember that democracy is not a spectator sport, and they need to get involved. And I think our book shows a lot of people from across the political spectrum, from all walks of life, all races, all religions, who have stepped up and gotten involved.
I think so, and for the better. Did you guys happen to, in your research and in your class, compare our history and our, history, if you want to call it, of disagreements and clashes and ups and downs and all arounds and people getting involved with that goes on in other countries?
A little bit. I mean, it's not really the focus of our book. I think it's very relevant. I mean, certainly today, you can't talk about some of the politics in the U.S. without comparing it to what's going on issues like Brexit, or how other countries in Western Europe are dealing with immigration and some of the backlash that you see. And certainly throughout our book, you're dealing with changes that are global. So some of the changes in the economy in the 1970s that we've discussed, the end of the manufacturing era and the rise of the service sector and computer industry are not just going to be shaking the United States with all of its ramifications, but they're having impact all over the globe. So it's not at the heart of our book, but certainly I think we think about this, and it's relevant questions that go beyond our own borders.
So, it kind of leads me to the question of, now that you guys have done all this research and written this great book and stuff, where do you see us going from here? I know it's not in the book, but let's go there anyway.
Well, as I like to say, our training as historians is in hindsight, so it's difficult for us to make predictions. But I think one thing that we can say is that, and I think it's important, as Julian said, to remember that where we're at isn't where we're going to be forever. The history is constantly moving and changing. And so, again, if you look back to the start of the book, when we talk about Watergate, that was a real stunner. We're talking about Watergate a lot these days, but the idea that a sitting president would resign from office after he just won a huge landslide election like Nixon had in 1972 was a real shock. And the 70s were followed with a series of major political reforms that really transformed the country in a lot of ways. So, that kind of change can happen very quickly. And we have to remember that our system is such that it's receptive to that. And so I can't tell you how the country is going to change in the near future, but I can assure you things will be moving quickly.
Yeah, I think that they will.
And then I guess just the book as a book, we live in a period now where there's so much just disinformation out in the public, and so many arguments are made about whether it's politics or society based on, the thinnest of evidence or just outright falsehood, that I think what we want to do, Kevin and I, is to show a different way to understand what's going on based on, real facts, real stories, real moments from presidents to activists who shaped our times. And we hope that debate can proceed from that rather than this world of disinformation. So a serious look at modern times, we hope, is an entry point into a serious discussion about the issues of our day.
Absolutely wonderful and very well said. Now, in the last couple of minutes or so that we have left, tell people how they can get the book and how they can get to the book fair.
Well, you can get the book anywhere you buy books, Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. Local booksellers, if you have them, we love them. You can find it anywhere. It's out in paperback soon, but the hardcover book is really priced to move. And again, we'll be at the Miami Book Fair on, I think, Sunday, November 24th at 11 o'clock. So come on out to Miami-Dade College and come see us.
And
Awesome.
Kevin and I, we love to talk. We love to have discussions. So if you can come out, we're happy, and we look forward to the conversation. That's what we do for a job. So we hope to see a lot of your listeners out there and talk about this book we've worked on.
It must be so much fun to be in your class. It must be just so gratifying. You know it. I like the book. I've so enjoyed having you on the show. It's been really nice. And again, for everybody that forgot, because we got into what we were talking about, the book is called Fault Lines: A History of the United States Since 1974. And it is, of course, widely available. And it will be at the Miami Book Fair. For more information, visit their website at www.miamibookfair.com. And to purchase the book, of course, if you can, buy local. And if not, well, it's everywhere. Oh, it's been really, really nice having you guys on this show. I appreciate it so much. Is there any last little thing you want to tell people before we go?
No, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Keep reading and keep looking for the facts of the matter. Don't let stuff sway you into making up your mind before you actually find out the facts of the matter.
Amen.
All right.
You might be
Bye-bye.
the one that pays the price for that, and that's always a bad thing because, I always get down to the price because I'm the money coach. Awesome, you guys.
Thank you.
Well, so much of
Bye-bye.
this does affect our economy, so it's a good thing.
There we go.
Thank you guys
All right.
so much. It's been
Bye-bye.
such a pleasure having you on the show. And for the listeners, I hope you enjoyed it because it's a really good book.
Okay.
Again, it's called Fault Lines. And remember
Bye-bye.
what I always tell you before I go. Be grateful, and you will attract good things. And until next time, I'm Rhonda Cobb, the Money Coach.